Hello everybody. In this video we're going to take a look at a special kind of camera, a camera called Camera and Aim. So first of all, let's take a look at this character that I have in my scene here. I'm currently looking through my perspective camera, and if I play, we see that the character walks off screen. Now, I typically recommend creating your own cameras that you'll use for rendering from and keeping your perspective camera as a working camera. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new camera. This will be just a regular camera. And I will name this my camera. And I'll look through it. I'll change my what appears to be my front viewport up here right now. I'm going to change that to my camera, and I'll position it. And once again, if I hit play, we'll see that the character will walk off screen. So what if I want the camera to follow the character? Well, of course I can animate the camera. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So I have my camera selected, and I will key it, scrub in my timeline, and aim my camera. I'm going to aim it simply by rotating it from the top viewport. Till I put my character back into view here. And let's go ahead and key that camera and rewind and play. So let's take a look at another way that we could get this same effect. This time I'm going to create another camera, but this time, instead of creating a regular camera, I'm going to use a camera and aim. And when I create one, perhaps I'll name, well, actually I won't rename this one, but what I'd like you to take note of, I probably should rename it, but it's in a group here called Camera 1 Group, and if we expand on that group, you'll notice that nested inside is my camera and a second node, the Aim node. Let's take a look at what those do. I'm going to select my camera node here, and I'm going to look through that camera, and I'll zoom out so that we get a better view of the character here. And I'll hit play. And similar to the earlier example, the character walks off camera. Now, if I go to my perspective viewport, normally the easiest way to position your camera is to simply look through it, as I am doing here with my perspective camera, and place it wherever you want, using your Alt and left mouse button to rotate the camera, your Alt middle mouse button to pan it, and Alt right mouse button to move in and out with it. The camera and aim, however, works a little bit differently, and here's the camera I'm looking through, and it will also allow me to zoom in and out. But what I'd like you to take note of is that we have these two nodes here. We've got a camera node and an aim node. Let's see what happens if I select the aim node. Notice that in my top viewport I have my aim node selected here. And if I move this aim node, you'll see how it's affecting the view here in my camera 1. So the camera is staying in the same position, but I'm rotating the camera by moving this aim node here. So let's see how we can use this aim node to our advantage. I currently have the aim node selected and I'm going to key it. I'll scrub in my timeline here. And I'll move the aim node so that it once again focuses on my character, and I will key that as well. And if we rewind and play, you'll see that the camera more or less follows the character. So let's take a look at yet an easier way that we could accomplish that. And what I'm going to do is, with my camera aim node selected, I'm going to get rid of the animation on it. And I'm simply going to take that aim node, which I currently have selected here. I'm in my perspective window, which is why we're not seeing anything happen. If I move it, you'll notice that it does affect the camera here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this aim node a child of this control on the character. And I'll just reposition it a little, like this. So now you'll notice that the aim node, which is here, and I have currently selected, is actually a child of this main control, this control here on the character. And if we come in here to our camera 1 view and play, you'll notice that the camera very nicely follows along with the character. Now, one of the advantages of this AIM camera is, of course, that we can animate not only what the camera is aiming at very easily, but also the camera's position in 3D space. So that's what I'll do here. I'm going to select my camera now, and I will put a key on it. Scrub in my timeline, and let's go ahead and just move the camera. Perhaps we'll move it over here, and I'll key that. Scrub in my timeline. And play. So perhaps not the best effect here, but well, we can try moving the camera elsewhere instead. Maybe I'll get rid of that last key. I'll get rid of both of the keys, actually. Key the position of the camera in 3D space. Or perhaps first we'll move the camera where we want it, and then key it. Scrub, and we'll try moving the camera this time. Over here, and keying that. So now we have both the camera and, of course, the aim moving independently of one another, but always with our character in focus. Here we'll take a look at another example where we'll do something very similarly. And what I have here is a rocket ship, and it is animated on a motion path. And if you want to know how I attached it to a motion path, you can watch one of my other videos where I demonstrate this. Now, one thing I should mention is that I am using two different N particle systems in here, which means that I cannot conveniently scrub in my timeline. That if I scrub in my timeline as I'm doing now, it will be unable to do the calculations necessary to actually figure out what the N particles should be doing. So to make it a little bit easier to work with, I'm going to very quickly create a cache for my two particle systems by selecting them, going to my effects menu, Ncache, create new Ncache. Now that I've created my Ncache, and remember this is really only important if you're using dynamics, if you're using a system such as the N particles as I am here. But now that I've created that cache, I can easily scrub back and forth in my timeline without Maya having to make the necessary calculations for the N particles. The particle effect, in essence, has been baked into it now. So, like the previous example, I'm going to create another camera. I'll go once again to Create, Cameras, Camera and Aim. Once again, it creates a group nested underneath. It contains the camera itself and the aim node. For the time being, I'm going to leave the camera at the middle of my 3D space here. So its position is at translate X, Y, and Z, 0, 0, and 0. Do take note, however, that the rotation of the camera is actually being affected by something else. That's why we have these little blue tick marks here. That something else, of course, is the camera 1 aim node. Now, I'm going to change my top viewport here to actually look through my camera. And in fact, I'll go ahead and name my camera, My Camera. And in my top viewport here, I'm going to go to Panels, Perspective, My Camera. I'll select the camera that I just created so that we'll be looking through that camera in this viewport, as we're doing now. And I'm going to do something a little different this time from what I had done last time. If you remember when we attached the camera aim to the character, I actually physically made it a child of one of the controls on the character. But this time I'm going to use a constraint. So I'll select my ship here, the spaceship, and I will select the camera 1 aim node. And I'm going to change to my animation menu set, go to Constrain, Point Constraint. So now my aim constraint is actually, sorry, my camera aim node is actually constrained to this rocket. And if we play the animation in this viewport here, you'll notice that my camera will always follow along with the rocket. Let's see if we can make this a little more interesting. What I'm going to do is create a very quick environment for my scene here. I'm going to start with a cube, perhaps scale it up. I will do a mesh smooth on it, maybe add some divisions here. We'll scale it a little larger, like this. and create a new material for it. I'll open up my Hypershade and create a new Lambert for it. And we'll go ahead and apply the Lambert to the sphere. Double click on the material, go to its attribute editor, and under the color channel, we'll go ahead and apply a texture. In this case, we're going to try we'll try the noise texture here. Press 6 on my keyboard so that I actually see the texture applied to my mesh. Now, under the noise tab of my material here, the noise that I've applied to the color channel of my texture, I'm going to try to adjust the frequency as well as the density to get something maybe that looks like a star field. So let's go ahead and bring up the density. And I'll bring down, the frequency. I brought up the frequency. And I'll bring down the density. And I think this makes a pretty good star field here. But in fact, I want to do more than just use this for the color channel. I think I will also apply this same texture to the incandescence found here on this material. So I'll open up the Hypershade. With my material selected, we'll look at its input and output connections here. And I'm simply going to I'm going to connect the noise color to my incandescence channel of the material. Now that I've done that, I'm going to select my cube here, which is now more of a spherical shape. I will go to my modeling menu set, mesh display. I'm going to reverse the normals so that they're actually pointing inward. And this is not necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and turn on backface culling as well so that we can see through this. And we'll go ahead and just come in here inside our little environment. I'm looking through my perspective camera right now. You can see that the ship flies through this environment here. However, if we look at it through my camera that I created earlier, we'll get this. Now, perhaps my star field is a little too dense, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to its noise node, adjust some of the parameters a little bit to maybe reduce the number of stars here. Perhaps something like that. And maybe a couple other things that I might do is come over here to Show, None, turn off the grid, go to Show, Polygons, and show N particles, because we've got N particles in here. And here's what we have. Finally, we'll take a look at one more example. So here we have a scene that has an end cloth object along with some passive colliders. And if I play it, you'll see the interaction that I get. What if we want our camera to follow along with this ball that drops through this little obstacle course that we have here? So once again, I'm going to create a camera name. Here's my camera. And here's the aim node. As you see, when I move that aim node, it does affect the way the camera's pointing. And what I'm going to do is something very similar to what I did with the rocket example previously. In other words, I'm going to select the object. I will select the aim node found under the group here. Go to my animation menu set, constrain, and we'll do a point constraint. Let's go ahead and look through this camera. I'm going to move the camera a little bit over, we'll move it over here perhaps. Find a good place where we can get a good view of it. We could try this. And let's go ahead and play the animation and see what we get. So here we ran into a little problem. The problem is that our point constraint will not work with this end cloth object. So let's go ahead and break that constraint that we have on our aim. Here, I'm simply going to delete the constraint. We could try taking this aim constraint and making it a child of this piece of geometry, as we did with the very first example with the walking character. So let's just find out what the object is called. It's called p-cube1. I'm going to go ahead and take my aim constraint, drag it into the p-cube1 to make it a child of it. We'll go ahead and play. And as you can see, that didn't fix our problem either. Let me rewind. And I'll take my aim constraint and put it back into the group because we need to find a different solution here. So to get this to work, what I'm going to do is select my geometry, the end cloth object that is going to be falling and going through this obstacle course here. I will control select my my camera aim node. And I'm going to go to constrain, but in this time, instead of trying a point constraint, we'll try a geometry constraint. So when I apply that, and then play, my camera now follows the end cloth object. So that's how you can use the camera with the aim along with dynamics, in this case with an end cloth example. Now remember that we still can control the camera itself. We can still reposition the camera if we want, or even animate the camera. Because it is in fact the aim node that is constrained right now. So looking at my camera here, notice that if I move my camera itself, it's always aiming at my end cloth object. I can position it here, for example, play. And you'll see that it still aims at our end cloth object. I think I actually like it better where it was positioned before.